Crusader of Senti is an action-adventure and was basically Sega's answer to The Legend of Zelda, but it brought its own share of new ideas that make it much more than a simple knockoff. You take up the fight as a young boy who wants to rid the world of monsters, but it soon takes a strange turn, as you lose the ability to communicate with humans and end up only being able to talk to animals. With the help of your faithful dog Johnny, you set out to regain your speech, which quickly expands into a much greater adventure that sees you exploring all four corners of the land. When it comes to gameplay, let's get the obvious out of the way, and yes, it plays very much like Zelda, where your sword is your main means of attack, from simple swings to being able to throw it like a boomerang. But where things get interesting is with the different animals you'll meet along the way who alter the sword's abilities, from adding ice to fire and lightning to your attacks, or new ways to travel and open up previously blocked off paths that play into the various puzzles that are equally as prominent as the combat itself. The challenge they add to the game can't be understated, and having a keen understanding of what all of the animals you have can do plays a central role in completing each of them. Add to this the several boss fights throughout the game, which also depend on utilizing your animals properly, and it ends up feeling like a really intuitive system that on the surface may look like it hasn't got that much to offer, but upon playing it you soon see the depth. Overall, if you're looking for an engrossing adventure on the Genesis, then Crusader of Senti is worth playing. Eliminate Down is a horizontal shooter, and while it never got the same reception as the likes of Thunder Force or Darius, it's an excellent game that absolutely pushes the Genesis to its limits. As with many other shooters, you jump into a ship and are given a hefty amount of weapons to make your way through a series of challenging levels. The difficulty might be too much for some to swallow, but for those with sharp reflexes as well as plenty of patience, it'll be incredibly hard to put down. When it comes to the weapons themselves, you've got three different types of shots: a forward, backwards, and diagonal shots that are spread across the face buttons from A to C. Of course, power-ups are also thrown into the mix and can be acquired by collecting Ps that float around the screen at certain points, with each weapon having 5 different levels of power. You can also collect Es, which eventually turn your main gun into a powerful laser that makes short work of the enemies that relentlessly come your way. The levels are absolutely overflowing with targets, so it's easy to get overwhelmed, and the bosses are huge, usually filling half the screen with the other half being taken up by their attacks. Holding on to your upgraded weapons is the best way to counteract the spikes in difficulty, and when you die, your main gun reverts to its most basic form, while your other weapons lose 1 level, so getting it back isn't too much of a headache. Not only is Eliminate Down a superb shooter on the Genesis, but it's also amongst the greatest of the 16-bit era. Its outstanding gameplay and stunning visual direction come together to make a game that is still impressive to this day, so if you can find it for a good price, don't hesitate to add this one to your collection. Blades of Vengeance is an often overlooked action platformer that sees the world being overtaken by an evil dragoness known as Manax, who's thrown the population into war, famine, and despair. A once gentle spirit who looked after the land is all but diminished, but manages to conjure up the power to create 3 warriors of light, capable of taking the fight to Manax and hopefully returning the kingdom to peace. You get to choose from one of these characters who each have their own different qualities when it comes to gameplay. You've got an old wizard that's best at fighting from a distance thanks to a magical staff that focuses on projectiles, a huntress whose blend of power and agility make her the most well-rounded choice, and finally a bounty hunter who's slow but deals far more damage. You're tasked with making your way through a total of 7 different levels that slowly amp up the challenge, with various types of enemies and bosses waiting for you to defeat. What makes it quite compelling though is the item system that sees several treasure chests scattered throughout each level, offering up different amounts of gold or silver, which can be spent on health, extra lives, armor, strength scrolls, and other items that increase the odds of your success. On top of this, you've also got power-ups that grant brief periods of increased damage or invincibility that can really help out in one of the several situations that the game presents. What really steals the show though is the 2-player option, and this is where Blades of Vengeance really comes into its own, as it increases the difficulty and takes for granted that both of you have a clear understanding of your character's abilities and how to use them effectively. If you've exhausted the usual platformers on the Genesis and are looking for something new, Blades of Vengeance is definitely worth checking out. Mazing Saga is a beat-em-up that's based on the Devilman and Mazinger franchises and sees the player taking on the role of Koji, who wields a powerful armor to fight against an all-out invasion of the Earth. Known as bio-beasts, these powerful giants will stop at nothing to claim the world for their master, but thankfully Koji along with his suit are more than up to the fight, which takes place across a range of different levels as you slaughter beast after beast in your quest to reach the boss waiting for you at the end. Koji is capable of pulling off one of several different attacks, from basic kicks to swinging your sword and a very effective spiral move that's perfect for crowd control. You also get a special that attacks everything on the screen, but to make it less OP, you also receive damage depending on how many targets get hit. As you've no doubt noticed, the beat 'em up section is pretty run-of-the-mill, but where Mazing Saga begins to outshine the similar games of its kind on the Genesis are during the boss fights, which flip the entire game and present themselves as a one-on-one fighter. It doesn't offer a lot of depth, but you get many different attacks in these moments, as well as a welcome break from the minute-to-minute beat-em-up action. This is all made even better by the visual makeup of the game, which is pretty impressive for the Genesis. Sure, the sprites are quite small, but the animation of each is what really helps breathe life into the game, and that's not even mentioning the backgrounds of each stage, that all depict different locations of a ravaged Earth that always presents something interesting to take in. Despite the somewhat unfair difficulty and relatively short length, Mazing Saga is a solid beat-em-up that any fan of the genre will be able to jump into and enjoy. Treasure were responsible for some of the most memorable games to hit the Genesis, with the likes of Gunstar Heroes and Treasureland Adventure under their belt. Their third title would offer something entirely different though, and would revolve around a simple concept of swapping out your head for different abilities. You take control of the star of the show, Hedy, and are tasked with taking on 9 levels, each of which have a number of different acts, with a boss waiting for you towards the end. You've got your basic run and jump, as well as a headbutt attack, but as I mentioned, swapping out your head is where the game really starts to reveal its greatness. There's about 18 of them in the game, which all bring new ways for Hedy to survive and offer up a different spin on the usual gameplay. This variety is what really helps the game succeed, and as you make your way through it, it'll constantly surprise you with many of the inventive ways that Hedy can take on the many trials and obstacles that stand in your way. It's pretty forgiving at the start of the game, but the difficulty slowly spikes, and if you haven't got your head around the many options you have at your fingertips, then you'll soon find yourself in hot water. This is most prominent during the boss encounters, which are just as creative as they are challenging. From giant mechanical dogs to evil demons, they're all fast-paced and will keep you on your toes as you try to figure out their attack patterns and wait for a window to strike. While the game isn't as deep as Super Mario World or Sonic, Dynamite Hedy has got a charm all of its own, and thanks to its unique mechanics, it's an absolute blast to play through even all of these years later. The Genesis was home to many different fighting games, from Virtua Fighter to Mortal Kombat and Eternal Champions, but one that hit well under the radar was Treasure's take on the popular manga series Yu Yu Hakusho. It offers a bizarre and diverse set of characters to choose from, all of which fans of the series will instantly recognize, and sees them all having a string of basic moves such as kicks and punches. But what helps each of them stand out are the selection of special moves that all of them call their own. 2 universal techniques let you parry a lot of incoming attacks, one lets you leap backwards to the edge of the screen to dodge close-range assaults, while the other lets you jump into the background to avoid projectiles. You've also got an energy bar that allows you to pull off stronger versions of moves that starts out full at the beginning of each fight. As you use your special moves, the bar slowly depletes and can only be recharged by holding down the attack buttons when you find a moment to do so. This adds a veil of strategy to each fight and quickly becomes a balancing act of trying to keep up the pressure on your opponent while attempting to maintain enough energy. As with most fighters, you've got several modes to jump into apart from the usual single player, and playing with a friend is where it truly shines. If you're able to track down a multi-tap, you can even enjoy 2-on-2 battles, which is where the game is at its best. For fans of the series as well as newcomers alike, this is easily one of the best fighting games on the system, so if you can find it, it's definitely worth picking up for your collection. Pulseman is a platformer that shares a lot of similarities with Mega Man and revolves around the digital creation of an eccentric scientist who must battle against the creations of his rival. In terms of actual gameplay though, it's more in line with the Sonic games and sees you reaching blistering speeds as you find your way through each level, all the while taking advantage of Pulseman's unique abilities. You've got the standard punch and kick, which helps you take care of enemies, but your greatest asset is your ability to conduct electricity and use it in a variety of creative ways. You can release it as an energy blast as well as a short dash, but where it really comes into play is how it allows you to literally transform into a bolt of electricity. In this form you can blast off in any direction, but even better, you can bounce off walls to reach greater heights or destroy them altogether to open up new paths. Finally are the power lines that let you travel long distances, and it's here where the Sonic influence is felt the most. Much like in that game that sees you going through loops at high speeds, here in Pulseman it feels painfully familiar, but to keep it from being too powerful, the game cleverly designs its stages so you can't use it all of the time. For a Genesis game, Pulseman is incredibly easy on the eyes, which is mostly due to the brilliant art design rather than the several special effects that make the game up. The environments and characters were created by Pokemon renowned designer Ken Sugimori, giving the game a very unique feel. The sprites have a lot of personality, are huge, and are animated smoothly, giving everything on the screen a life of its own. The game just oozes style and makes you wonder why Pulseman never caught on and reached the same heights of the other platformers on the system. Cotton is a series of shoot-em-ups that never found much success outside of Japan, and was your typical side-scrolling shooter, albeit with a bright, colourful and cute aesthetic that all revolves around a young witch and her fairy sidekick. Upon hearing from the queen that havoc is breaking out in the kingdom, the duo set off to try to figure out who's responsible and most importantly why. But when it comes to gameplay, this entry flipped the perspective from a side-scrolling view to facing the action head-on, in what feels like a clone of Star Fox or Space Harrier, but with enough unique ideas for it to stand on its own. As Cotton rides her broom around the screen, you control her to avoid oncoming obstacles, bullets and enemies, and you can fire back shooting small bursts of magic. She also has many secondary attacks at her disposal. These are enchanted spells which can be obtained in each stage by touching different coloured scrolls. What's really handy is that you can keep an inventory of them and store a few as you progress, and as you approach one on the screen you can shoot it and change the spell they give, with each of them providing a wide range of different effects, such as an arc of electricity around your character or being able to launch fireballs forward. What makes it even more interesting though is the light RPG mechanics that the game deploys. This comes in the form of experience points, and as you defeat each enemy you'll receive a small amount as your power meter at the top of the screen slowly fills. When it maxes out you gain a level, which improves the effectiveness of your basic shots and gives you more of a fighting chance to hold your ground throughout the several levels that make up the experience. If you're into shooters and are looking for one that's a little bit different from the norm, then Panorama Cotton is just the ticket. Beyond Oasis is an action RPG that never gets the recognition it deserves, and sees you filling the role of Ali, who stumbles upon a mysterious gold armlet that entrusts the power it holds upon him. He's told that he must gain the knowledge of 4 ancient spirits and then use their abilities to destroy the bearer of a silver armlet who's dead set on the destruction of the world. As you travel around the land you'll inevitably run into many different monsters, but thankfully Ali is pretty handy when it comes to combat and has many attacks that he can use to dispose of his enemies. Your main weapon is a dagger, and by using different combinations you'll be able to slash, perform a spinning and dash attack, as well as a powerful somersault that completes your array of moves. You'll come across a selection of different weapons as well, such as flaming swords, arrows and bombs, which all have their own advantages. But where the combat truly excels is within the use of the 4 spirits you have to seek out. Each of them grant Ali different skills, such as the fire spirit, which allows him to launch fireballs, or the shadow spirit, which allows him to be in 2 places at once and ultimately deal more damage. You've got to be careful though, as each of these actions consume SP, and if you run out you'll be left fighting on your own. It's fair to say that a lot of the game is spent in battle, but there's an equal amount of exploring and puzzles which also utilize these spirits as well. From unlocking doors to lighting the path forward, they open up each environment and allow you to access previously blocked off areas where you're rewarded with several items that can't be found elsewhere. Unfortunately, because it was released so late into the console's life, this is one game that is unfairly ignored by the masses, even if it's appreciated by those who were lucky enough to play it at the time. So if you've never got round to it, now would be the perfect time to change that. Side-scrolling platformers that offered up a good amount of challenge were a dime a dozen on the Genesis, but one that doesn't get mentioned that often is Eliza Dragoon. You take control of this powerful sorceress along with her 4 creature companions that help out in many meaningful ways throughout the adventure, and there's about 8 levels in total with plenty of obstacles to overcome. Thankfully, Eliza is pretty powerful herself, with her main weapon being the lightning that she shoots from her hands, where the player doesn't have to worry about aiming, as holding down the attack button causes a stream of lightning to automatically lock onto enemies in front of you. Even though this sounds like it would make the combat incredibly simple, what keeps it in check is a magic meter that drains as you use it. Because of this, just simply spamming it is not an option, and instead you'll need to take strategic pauses. In these moments though, the 4 creatures I mentioned earlier come into play. You can only have one of them activated at any given time, and they all possess their own attacks and can be leveled up by collecting power-ups, so choosing the right one for the situation you find yourself in can make your life a lot easier. From shooting fire to conjuring shields, and having the ability to swap them out on the fly makes them an integral part of the gameplay. When it comes down to it, Eliza Dragoon is nowhere near the best platformer you'll find on the Genesis, but thanks to the various ideas it can call its own, it more than stands out amongst the crowd. If you're looking to play it, it is also now available on the Nintendo Switch online service if you don't want to pay stupid amounts of money for a physical copy. Well, that does it for another video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos which release every Monday and Thursday. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with and to take part in giveaways. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining my Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.